try going live. How about that? I gotta wait for the TV. I got ahead of myself.
Dude, you're controlling like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different devices right now.
No wonder I get a little overwhelmed.
There's 9 devices in this room.
This is how my head feels all the time. This is my brain.
I don't know how you do this.
Oh, I didn't change the title. That would help. We're not talking camel fat or function. Oh, jeez. We're talking, what do we call this one? What do we say? Calculated?
Calculated killer Jake Bush.
All right, almost ready, guys. I don't know if it's going to update on there or not, but I can always fix it retroactively. So.
I have no doubt.
Okay, I think. Okay, there's that. Here's this.
Ready to rock?
Yeah.
This is the Okayest Hunter podcast. Never pass on shooter bucks, because that's just meat in the freezer. It's your tag, you hunt how you want. This is Okayest Hunter.
Better.
Wow, man. The drop time really is better in studio.
As soon as you walk through that door,
just changes things.
It's ready. It's just ready to hit you.
It's that cat pee lingering in the air. Gives you that extra acidity.
So, weird story about cat pee, and I don't know, I don't think this is actually what it is, but our house is close to like the little local community park, which is up on the hill, but like to get there, we can either take a shortcut through the woods or we walk down our hill on the sidewalk and then up the following hill takes us to the park. There's this one house that's on the way up the hill that every time I walk by, I get hit with like an interesting aroma. It kind of smells like cat piss.
Windex.
But there's also like a weird tree in their yard. So I'm like, every time I go by, I'm like sniffing around. I'm like, is it the tree?
It's all your cats
is
walking
there
over to their
all
house.
of my cats are going and pissing on their tree? Like, what's going on here? Very interesting.
Oh, that's funny. That is, yeah. Dude, I did clean the litter boxes yesterday night and prep for garbage day, which is Tuesday. So I'm like, I usually have like a weekly cadence where I'm cleaning this thing. So it shouldn't be that. And then I run the ozone unit afterwards. Yeah. I got the scent
after you
things
do the
going.
litter box?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it does something. I mean, definitely it kills scent.
Well, there was a spot in our basement in the back room where the cats had like smelled something and then peed there. And like that smell like forever got in my brain. You know what I mean? Then you like think you smell it all over. And I ran a little like one of those cheap Amazon ozone things over it.
Yep.
But like in my brain, I can still smell it, but no one else can smell it. So I think it's just a problem with
I have
me.
usually when you guys come down, I'm like, does it smell down here? And you guys are like, no. I'm like, no. It stinks,
See,
right?
I have the same thing. Like I think it stinks. No one else thinks it stinks.
Well, we're brought to you by Half Rack.
Cat pee specialist.
If I can like find a way to do some ridiculous opening topic and then Rick roll into Half Rack every time, I think that's like a pretty memorable outcome.
It makes you very happy.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy. Their meat lug's coming out soon. My son is like a meat lug. I want to put him in that, take photos, and be like, here's the meat lug.
I am actually, now that we're thinking about doing Illinois early season hunt.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I want to put the meat lug to use because that is going to be something I'm definitely going to need to handle is if we get one early season.
And you could use any cooler, but that one is called the meat lug. It would be dedicated for your meat. And the size of it, the nature of it, the soft cool, the sealing capability, all that stuff seems just like a great choice.
Yeah.
Then you don't got to tell your wife, oh, I use that cooler for the meat, and like not tell her, but actually like slip up at some point or leave a bear meat rotting in your closet.
Leave a bear head in your cooler for a month.
You got a lot of hate on social for that one. Who forgets about a bear? Well, life happens.
I did. It was my fault. I take the blame.
Anyway, half-rack, half-rack.com. Use code OHP to save yourself, I think, was it 15% off over there? Yeah, something like that. We'll save the we have a guest today. He's in the background, so we'll bring him on in a minute. But so we'll skip past Latitude. We'll come back to Latitude. Spartan Forge, SpartanForge.ai, code OHP, 20% off your annual membership, but it is free to try it out. The granularity, the detail, the constant releasing of new features and updates on there. Very nimble, very agile, very quick, very practical. I was just looking at my house the other day, and I see my playground. I see all the stuff. Like, it's just crazy.
The dead grass from the drought. Like, it's all there.
Yeah, honestly. Oh, is my lawn yellow? Well, that's because that's what's happening. So you want real-time data in an area. You want as close to boots on the ground as you can get before you put your boots on the ground. Like, that is it.
100%.
I don't know. So that's that. And could belabor that point all day. Bill might be listening to this episode. I'm not sure. He's a pretty busy dude. Method Archery. I got to fling some arrows over the weekend. I took my kids to the archery shop, brought my new Bear Legend XR with my new Method arrows. These ones actually say Method on them. All my other ones say Vector before they had their name change.
I'm still rocking the Vectors.
And it did pretty good. Like, I'm happy, but I need to practice. I need to just get comfortable. I think my comparison or analogy that I gave you was, it's like if I'm driving an old pickup truck, that steering wheel has play in it before the truck will even like switch lanes. And then you get in like a sports car and you touch the wheel to scratch your back and the whole car like jerks. Like, that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, you just got to iron out some bumps and figure it,
yeah.
You guys will be getting along.
I got to get the seat to the right position, make sure the rear mirror's in the right spot, and get comfortable, and then I can,
If you need help with the height,
yeah,
let me know.
Yeah, we'll just skyrocket you to the ceiling. Go Wild, they just partnered with Go Ruck, and I don't know if anyone knows this, but Go Wild has their own camouflage pattern, and so they did a collaboration with Go Ruck where it's their camo, like the Go Wild camo design on a Go Ruck, what is it, bag, the GR1. So in the Go Wild camo. So it's not live just yet. It'll be live tomorrow. So we're a little ahead of time. But I have to ask those guys, like, hey, what's new? What can I talk about? So we have this, but it'll be ready tomorrow. So obviously most people listen to this like Wednesday morning. So if you're wanting to check that out, it looks pretty awesome. Looking at a picture of it that they sent me, it's honestly pretty cool. And I was talking to Greg Tubbs. He's traveling for work right now, so he's not in studio. He has been wanting to do rucking because he, like, running isn't going to be a speed with his knees and whatnot. So he's like, man, I can just ruck, and that's a great way to like stay in shape.
It's awesome.
AJ damn it, I'm gonna mess up his last name again. Kazmierek. You know you have a hard last name if you're listening. I don't want to hear it.
A lot of vowels stacked weirdly with letters at the end of the alphabet.
He just did a video about rucking and then shooting. So he would do like a walk around the block, shoot his bow, walk around the block, shoot his bow. And he's like, after like the third one of those, he's like, I'm having to breathe pretty deep now, and it's getting a little bit trickier. So I think that's a kind of a cool way to, if anyone's trying to like stay fit or prep or whatever.
Heck yeah.
I don't know. I've never done it.
I did that last year before, like, I hadn't been running. Like, this year I'm doing a little bit better. You're doing awesome with the running, but I'm doing a little bit better with running, preparing myself and just being in shape in general. But last year, like a month before the season, I got like it's a LL Bean backpack. It's just got a whole bunch of straps on the back. I actually use it when I go look for moose sheds.
Oh,
because you can strap stuff to it, but you can also just strap whatever the heck you got laying around that's heavy,
like a sandbag.
Yeah, so I threw that on there, and I did a couple hikes. We got a bunch of hills by the house. I would just do a couple hikes, rucking around.
Yeah, you got some good hills. I don't think we have much of. I got a couple maybe.
Fairly flat.
Anyway, yeah, fairly flat.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's it. And then Latitude, obviously, code OHP over there. I forget what we're getting on discounts with those guys. I think it's 15% off accessories. We'll have to check back and see, but nonetheless, let's get you on here, dude. Jake Bush, you're live on the show with us. Thanks for impromptu. I think I asked yesterday, hey, can we get Jake on the show?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Oh, and I forgot to send you that link. I do this to everybody. It never
That's
gave
okay.
me sorry about that, buddy. Oh, well. Guess your Facebook fans are going to miss out.
We'll get them next time.
Yeah, it'd be distracting. Let's not worry about those people. But well, welcome to the show, man. You've been very busy, up to a lot of things. I think the last time we had on our show, we were still Where to Hunt, and it could have been a tactic talk. It could have been a regular episode. We have since moved from our second floor room to the basement and have changed a lot, but still the same old goofballs doing the same old thing.
Yeah, congratulations, guys. Yeah, been up to a lot on my end. I took a full-time job with Latitude Outdoors now, and I'm the customer education coordinator. So we've been working on a bunch of different videos as far as like hunting education, scouting. We're working on some stuff with the products specifically. been doing a couple trade shows. We've been all over the place. We've got the Mobile Hunter Expos coming up in the next month and then 2 months, and there's just a bunch going on all over the place. So yeah, I always like to come down in the basement and talk deer with somebody. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're doing your own podcast with those guys, the In Sessions, which I've been listening to. Derek's been listening to.
I've heard them all, and man, I got to tell you, some of the YouTube stuff, I haven't been able to dive into some of your videos as much as I have the podcast. I've been driving like crazy lately, just running everywhere. So the podcast I've been able to tune into, but I've got some acquaintances and friends who are pretty serious hunters and enjoy the tactical information. And they have been absolutely ranting and raving about the stuff you guys have been doing with YouTube and like how-tos and your hill country stuff. I mean, I know that's your cup of tea and your bread and butter, but man, they have absolutely loved what you've been doing. So great job. Keep it up.
Yeah, thank you. That means a ton. You know, obviously this is all brand new for me and for us. And so to see good feedback is always a great thing. And, you know, the whole idea and the whole concept behind the video series specifically, really stemmed from my issues when I was listening to podcasts, right? Like I love podcasts. I'm a podcast guy and I listen to them all the time. But every once in a while you get like a really high level guest on and they're like, you go east here and west and the ridge is facing north and the hub's here and the deer are doing this, and my head just starts spinning. And I was like, it'd be really cool if I could like see this on video, like with a map. You know what I mean? It would just make it all come together. And so I kind of, you know, I had a couple guys I work with and we all kind of dreamed this thing up. And then Derek Bradis, Corey Godar, Alex Chop, all these guys have just done a great job of putting this little dream together for me. And I couldn't be more thankful. I mean, it's been absolutely awesome so far. Our last episode actually launches this Friday. So if you guys want to see that, it's actually top 5 publicly in whitetail scouting tactic video.
Ooh.
Which
wow.
Yeah. So basically it's only based on our experiences from this spring. So take that with a grain of salt. It's not like we had, you know, a panel of judges deciding what goes where. It was really Derek and I and Corey and Alex traveled the country. We went to a bunch of different states. We scouted on our own. We scouted with Chris Lepper, Josh Luck, Greg Glitzinger, and Ryan Glitsky. And so we just took like all of that and came up with our top 5 from the In Session series this year. But I think it turned out great. It's going to be an awesome video. Like I said, it launches Friday. So if you guys do want to watch that, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it'll be on while I'm working in here.
I'll definitely
I work from home
watching.
on Fridays. It'll be on the TV in the studio while I'm working for sure. That's one of those where,
man,
yeah.
there was just listening to the podcast part, man. There's so many things that a person can just relate to, and I hope I'm not giving like in your top 5 or whatever. But one of the things, I think it was you and Alex and all the guys that like you had just done a scouting mission and you were talking about it in one of your podcasts, episode 3 or 4 or whatever. And one of the things I just thought was awesome was you guys were talking about each day you went to a different spot. And in one of the spots you had it like in your mind, it looked so great. And you got there and you had scouted like 6 or 7 miles and it kind of just, you didn't find what you were looking for, but you just kept going. And you ended up finding some awesome little hidden gems that weren't visible on the map that if you would have turned around after mile 3 or 4, you would have never found. And it was like, man, I've done that so many times where I get to a property, it's not what I thought. And I'm like, I should just leave. No, well, let's just go look at, you know, a little bit further. And you end up finding something. So like that in itself was like, that's such a great tip that most people like just want to end it easy and go home.
At least you guys know what you're looking for. I'll just wander around the whole time like, I don't know. This could be good as the other spot. I clearly didn't see that sign that Derek called out. But like, I don't know. No, but like the filming that you guys are doing to put that into video context, I think is pretty hardcore and awesome. Like that's not easy to do. It takes a lot of work, production, thought has to go into that. Like, and then to stay consistent with it, dude, it's a huge lift. I have to commend you guys. And then you guys are putting on Latitude's putting on a film festival. Like what, right? Is that at the Mobile Hunter Expo that's happening?
Yeah, so that'll be the Kalamazoo Expo in Michigan, late July, and we're actually still taking entries for that. So if anybody listening to this wants to submit a video for the Film Fest, there's some awesome prizes attached to that whole Film Fest. So we would appreciate any sort of videos that we can get. We're going to do a review of them and come up with like a certain amount to actually launch at the Film Fest, but it should be a great time. So if you guys want to launch a video, we would greatly appreciate that.
I may have talked to my producer, Jace Martinetto with Martinetto Media, and I was like, hey, Do we think we can do something with this?
I would love that.
I was gonna say,
I would love that.
Your hunt this year. I don't know if that. I don't think it was over 10 minutes.
No, it wasn't. But I don't know if like that as a standalone would work. So whatever. I was like, maybe we can work with what we have and like cobble it together to have a little bit. Who knows?
Is there an okayest hunting video category?
we can make it work.
Can we get like most entertaining? Or
all
something
the angles
like that?
are bad.
Yeah. You never know. I would love.
Jace's angles are good.
Awesome.
Yeah. Just a fail reel, like 8 minutes of failing. People are like, oh, that's me. Oh, that happened to me. Oh, yeah. Glad that wasn't me.
You laugh. You laugh. The whole blooper thing with our in session. We were thinking about the same thing. Like today, we're sitting down in this basement and we're coming up with the last one. We're recording the VO for it, and I must have done 150 takes on that VO for the outro. Perfect. And Derek's standing in the corner, and I can keep seeing his eyes peeking at me. And every time he does, I just lose it. So like, I made him leave the room. Like he had to leave. But yeah, we got bloopers on bloopers, so we would appreciate it. It would be awesome.
That's a fun one. Yeah, definitely be different. I always try to do different, not better. Like I'm not going to do a better hunt than someone or like a more cinematic something, but I'm like, could do something different. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. When we were doing like, so 2013 was when I started podcasting. It's when we like had the inception of where to hunt. And I remember doing the VO for that. And I had my buddy there with me and I was doing, should I say welcome to the or welcome to thee? And like I didn't, and then I couldn't remember what we decided when he hit the record button. I was like, "Welcome to the," and I was like, "Was I supposed to say the or the?" So I was like, "Welcome to the fuck." Like, he's like, "We're rolling with that, man. That's got to be it.
That's perfect."
When recording lights go on, whether video or audio, like stuff just hits a little weird sometimes. You know, armpits start to sweat a little bit. Yeah, it's awkward.
Yep, no doubt. You just got to roll with it. Just keep on rolling.
No, and so you guys, as far as I understand, the Carbon Series speed sticks are like, they won best product at ATA. They're starting to ship end of this month. Like, is that? I don't have a date. No one gave me a date. I think that's fine. I'm not going to ask you for a date, but like, you guys are ready to rock with those things come end of month. It sounds like. Yeah,
we are, and it will be the end of June, and then it's gonna obviously go out into like mid-July-ish a little bit, just depending on order numbers, But yeah, we're really excited for those. So I've had them on and off for a while, and I've been testing them, and I've personally loved them. I'm really excited about it. They pack amazing. They're really light. They stick to the tree great. The attachment method to me is like nothing I've ever used before. I came from a cam buckle. I've tried rope mods, but this thing is just slick. It's so easy. But, in the back of my head through all that, I'm thinking like it's a very biased opinion from me, right? Like yes, I want the best gear. And that's kind of what led me to work with Latitude to begin with. Like I really love their saddles. I love their accessories. Their ropes have been awesome. I always really liked their branding and how clean everything was. But this opinion on the sticks to me, I was like, I'm taking it with a grain of salt for myself because I'm probably a little bit biased. But I was at TAC this last week, and being at TAC, seeing these sticks in the hands of hundreds of different people that were, really using the sticks well. And, we have the trees set up there, so we get people that come up and they tear them down, they set them back up. They're jumping up and down on these things, and they are amazing. They held up great. Basically, every person that I talked to loved them. So I'm really excited to get them in the hands of the masses and just see how people take them. I think it's going to be awesome. I think they're going to be a great addition to anybody's setup.
That's got to be a really good feeling when you like the product, but you're working for the company, so I see the bias side of it. But then to see it in the hands of like the everyday people who are there, and to know that it is as exciting and cool as you thought it was, that's great.
Yeah, you got to believe in it yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. Like you wouldn't be doing it if you weren't already a believer. And you're like, wow, I'm really glad this product doesn't suck.
This kicks ass.
Like, I can get behind this. This is great. I don't have to use this for the camera and then switch to my actual stuff. Like you can use it for real. But the no metal thing, I think, is really kind of cool. Like you guys have done such a good job, or Latitude's done such a good job with like reducing any sort of noise on their systems. So I think that's just really cool. I'm excited to see what you guys continue to do to innovate, because as we've talked about on this podcast openly, like innovation's hard when everyone's doing it, and they've been doing it for a while now. Like it's like, any joker can go up on to the golf course and start knocking balls on a fairway or on a driver. But then you start to like fine tune things and get to the putting green, and it's like, well, now hold on a second. That's not so easy. It's like Happy Gilmore. Most people are Happy Gilmore. And then, everyone else trying to do micro movements and fine tune adjustments. This is a terrible analogy. Like someone put me out of my misery here.
I love it. I love it. But yeah, and I will say that, it's really nice working with a bunch of guys that just are very creative and their minds are always at work. Like there's no shut off switch for us. And I talk about this all the time. Like I'll text Alex. I was texting Alex 5 minutes ago, and Derek left my house a half hour ago, and I was like, we're always talking to each other. And the really nice thing about Latitude and the guys that are like specifically our engineers in the background are, if you have a crazy idea or a wild idea and you pitch it to them, they're going to do whatever they can to try to figure out how to make that come to life. And I think that's where a lot of these ideas and this innovation's born from. And so I'm really excited for the future. I think there's going to be a lot of big things coming from Latitude in the future.
Yeah, I have to believe so. Like no one has whispered a word of this to me. I'm not saying this is the thing that's on the horizon or not, but like I could almost envision, and let's maybe pitch this to the engineers and see what they have to say. But like,
all right, I'm perked up. What do you got? What do you got here, Eric?
we talk about like reducing metal noise, and like there's magnets in the saddles, and like it's all this mesh, and then you come up with these carbon series speed sticks, this proprietary carbon fiber plastic blend, or what it's aerospace stuff. And when are we gonna get a platform that doesn't make any metal noise?
Yep. So I'll refer these guys to the podcast and let them listen to you. You just pitched it for them. So
there we go. Like I want it to be just as effective as anything else, but like I don't want it to make noise. Let's just take metal out of the equation completely. Is that safe? I have no idea if that can hold up, because I'm sure there's a lot of like OSHA safety guideline regulations you have to meet. Like you have to be 10x or something times the actual weight it could hold or whatever. So yeah. Anyway, I'll stop talking. I'm no engineer for products. I think the only product we have is a buck grunt tube that Matt made for us. Not knocking it, but I can't do it. Like, yeah,
pretty bad.
We're not a product
company. I love it.
No, so like I wanted to get into the technicality of things. Like I think the season, and I actually came to tears watching the episode you had after your dad had passed. I'm really sorry that happened, man. But my wife came in the living room. She's like, are you crying? What are you doing? You're watching a hunting video? I'm like, it's very emotional. Just don't ask about it right now. I can't talk. I actually can't talk because like I can't fathom how you must have felt with that. But the way you set up on these deer is so insanely calculated. Like, man, for me, I'm throwing darts at a dartboard half the time, and I can aim a little bit, but it's still pretty off. And I'll get lucky and hit the triple 20 every now and again, like this buck on the wall. But by and large, like you're aiming for triple 20s and you're hitting them. Like, how are you distilling that much information to know I need to take this travel corridor at this time and getting this tree on this day? Like, you've got it dialed in. And I think I'll stop talking and get to the question here, but to kind of lay it up a little bit more, last year you mentioned like you're in the woods 300 days out of the season, whether that's scouting and or hunting. And like, I think last year was 70 days or something like that from what I maybe listened to. And you're getting in this new space now where it's going to be significantly limited. And so initially I was going to be like, can you help us distill this for us Okayest folks? Like, what can we take out of your playbook to lever up? And I'm not asking for shortcuts necessarily, but I don't know how I'm asking. How do you do it, man? That's a loaded question with a long answer, and I intend it to be because I want to talk about this.
I love it. So there is a ton to unpack there, right? And it's a great question. It really involves the entire process for me, and we can deep dive into that. So yeah, I'm gonna look at it from this year a little bit and how my perspective's changing with having less time to scout. So it's actually kind of a funny situation. So in the past, I've been very scouting focused, and my goal has always been to scout as much as possible and hunt the least amount possible to kill. Like, if that makes any sense at all.
Jake, can I stop you real quick just to clarify?
Yeah, you're good. Yep.
When you're talking scouting as much as possible, are you saying preseason scout as much as possible?
Yes.
In-season scout as much as possible, or just both?
So both, really. So it's obviously going to be heavily focused on, like, the majority of the scouting that I'm doing has always been focused on early season. And that's kind of why my success has always been early season. That first, let's say,
it's been fantastic.
1 to 10 days, right? Like, I have a 1 to 10 day period where I feel very dangerous, but we've seen twice now in the last 4 years where I get out of that 10-day window and I struggle really bad. I ended up getting lucky and filling my tag mid-November in 2020, but last year I I just couldn't put it together. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I'm very hyper focused on the early season thing. And like, that's my bread and butter. And that's what I really love to do. So I'm very like preseason scouting focused throughout the year. And I mean, I'll get to the point where I'll even take vacation to scout at times because I feel that confident that if I find the right thing, I'll be where I need to be come the opener. And I can just be extremely efficient and go in and, you know, calculate it and try to make that kill. But this year things are changing up quite a bit. So with the new job, you know, we're traveling around, we're filming. I am getting a lot of like out of state scouting done, but as far as in-state scouting, that's been put on the back burner a lot with all this production and everything else we got going on, our, you know, TAC events and expos and everything else. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do definitely have a lot less time to scout Ohio. But what I do get is I have a lot more time to hunt it. Like now, like come hunting season, I get to hunt, you know, like I'm going to be hunting, but I won't have the intel that I normally have because I don't have the same amount of days in the woods. So I'm looking at trying to find that balance. In the past, you know, I've covered a ton of ground in Ohio every single year. And, you know, last year I totaled just a little bit over 1,200 miles boots on the ground, and that's scouting and hunting throughout the season. But this year, it's going to be a couple hundred miles in the summer. A lot of that's mainly going to be running cameras. So the thing I have going for me that's really nice is I've been down here. This will be my 5th year. And basically anything within 2 hours of my house, and even beyond that in some directions, I've scouted like every square foot of it. I mean, I've been all over the land down here. I've just done everything I can to like explore and find these little hidden gems and these little nooks where I think it'll hold a good buck, and just, you know, fine tune those throughout the years. So coming into this year, what I'm looking at is I really want to stay focused on areas that have produced for me in the past, but I want to cast a wide net as well. So, you know, I'm not going to be going into like brand new areas and setting out a ton of cameras, but I will be running cameras in areas I've ran them in the past. And my goal is to just cast a really wide net. And I learned a lot last year from EHD. So it's funny because people probably listen to me on a podcast and I'm very back and forth. And I've heard Dan Infault talk about this before. He's like, you know, people will question him because his tactics kind of changed throughout the years. And mine do the same thing, but it's supposed to work that way. We're supposed to evolve. We're supposed to have conflicts. We're supposed to change our thought process and become better. And so obviously like what we're doing is going to change quite a bit. And what I did last year, I'm actually going back on now. Last year, I decided I was going to have 5 core areas. I was going to have 5 hub systems that I talk about. You know, the hubs that the sea would face either east to north, that 90 degrees, and it will run out to either ag or to like a really good section of white oaks somewhere in there. Like that's really been my hyper focus down here in the hills of Ohio. And the problem last year was I had 5 areas I really focused on, and EHD hit all 5 of those areas. So I go pull my cameras in September when I always do, and I don't have any deer above a 3-year-old to chase. And there's nothing wrong with killing a 3-year-old, but for my own journey and what I'm looking for, I just want to let those 3-year-olds try to get to the next level if I can and be a little smarter. And I just love that chase. Like I really enjoy that chase. So for me, it was just, I want to find a little bit older buck. Like that's all I wanted at the end of the day. And if I would have casted a wide net like I've done in the past, both in New York and in Ohio, I would have had deer to chase, just plain and simple. I would have found deer, but I didn't cast that wide net, and it really came back to bite me. And it took me, you know, 60 days in season. It took me all the way to January to even find a target to go after. And by that time, they're starting to shed out and everything else. So I'm looking back at that season, and I'm like, okay, I need to change it up because I want to do anything I can to never be in that situation again. And is it completely unavoidable? I don't think it is, but I do think that you can take your mistakes and your lessons learned, and I think you can evolve and become a better person and a better hunter because of it. You know, it goes far outside hunting, but looking at hunting, I'm looking to evolve from last year on my mistakes and just try to eliminate that. And so I'm going back to the way I used to be, casting that super wide net. We're going to circle back around to the super wide net thing here. And I'm just going to, like I said, I'm going to run a bunch of cameras in different systems, and I'm really just going to try to locate good deer. And then I'm going to try to kill them off of what I know and how I think they're going to be in that area. And that's going to come down to a lot of the scouting that I've done in the past. You know, I have, like when I go into an area and I scout, I find all the bedding and I find all the food and I find the hub scrapes and everything else, right? But it's really a matter of putting that together. For me, it's saying, bedding area A is going to be active when food source A is actually hot, like a white oak flat dropping. But in a lot of those areas, and this is where I think a lot of people get it wrong, those areas might only be active for 7 days, right? So,
or even less.
Or even less. So I think a lot of people go into these systems and they're really excited about it, and they find a bedding area with hair in the beds, and they find rubs, and they find scrapes, and they find a white oak flat, and they put all their eggs in that basket. Well, the white oak flat isn't hot that year, and they don't even use the bedding area. And so I think like the big thing that we need to do is we need to get in these systems and dissect them down to, okay, bedding area A is food source A. If that's active, this area is active. If bedding area B, if food source B is active, they're going to be bedded over here. They might not be bedded over in bedding area A anymore. So you need to be able to navigate that. And I think that's where you start getting into the fine details, is like when you can go in the woods and you can really start to dissect what bedding area they're in based off the active food source at the time. That's when I think you become really efficient early season. And that's, for a long time, I didn't know that this is something that I focused on so heavily, but I would say I'm like, everybody calls me a bed guy, but I would say that I'm 90% a food guy. Throughout my hunting journey, I've been more focused on the food source and then targeting a deer based on that food source than I have been about any bedding area. Do I know where the beds are at? Absolutely. I need to, because I'm setting up really close to them, but I'm not even looking at that bedding area if the food source isn't hot. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's the fundamentals of where this whole thing starts.
I mean, obviously, this is your observation of yourself, so you're probably correct. But I couldn't agree more. Jake, I've listened to almost everything that you've put out, and you're constantly talking about food trees. Every podcast I've ever heard you can't, you don't go on very long without mentioning some sort of oak or whatever kind of food tree there are. So you saying, wow, I really am a food, like, that's exactly what I got from listening to every podcast you've done. And you're basically just hunting how food relates to where you think the deer are bedding, right? Like, you're not hunting bedding. You find systems that work in your favor to intercept deer moving to food. And and you're great at that. That's what you do. Like, you found a system that works. You've manipulated it in such a way to make it work for you in those first 10 days of season. That's just wildly efficient.
Well, my thing is, like, to just add some color to this from the idiot's perspective, is like how, like, I'm making a lot of assumptions and I'm making estimated guesses, and I'm probably more I'm far, like 90% of the camp of where you're headed, where, like, I think even on our Okayest Hunter show that we put out on YouTube and Carbon TV, I think Derek Jace had asked you and Greg, what's Eric's biggest issue? And like Derek had answered, like, Eric just hasn't had time to scout. Like, so you're going in blind. I didn't have any intel, no trail cams, like nothing. I'm just picking spots and throwing sits because I'm like, I'll be damned if I don't go hunting.
Yeah.
I'm going to hunt. What am I going to get into? I have no idea. And so, this idea of like bedding area A, food source A, bedding area B, food source B, if this is active, that's an active area. How are you confirming or affirming that? So my issue is, as a hunter, and I've said this out loud several times, is that I might be making the right moves, but I would never have the confirmation or affirmation to know that has been validated unless I've had eyes on bucks. So it's one of that's that picture that you see, like the guy digging underground, and then the one turns back, and then the other digs, but he's like right there about to break through. Like, I never get to break through unless I see a deer and get to kill it. Like, so I've gotten, I think, I'm better at that, but I like, how do you know, is there a buck in that area? How are you validating that? And then B, what advice do you have for people that aren't as confident, that haven't had that much time in the woods collectively to feel that confidence that, like, I talked to Derek and he just knows he'll speed scout a property and like, nope, not holding bucks out. I'm like, man, how did you figure that out? My cousin, same way. Whitetail adrenaline guys, same way. Hunting public, similar. Like, you look at some of these folks like yourself and those others that I listed, and it's just this confidence in playing the chess game. So I'm asking a couple questions. Are you like, do you have trail cams out where you're like, oh, there is inventory here, this is the buck that I want, there is one in that area? Or like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And to break it down, I think the thing that I do down here well is like I hyper focus on one specific thing, right? Like for me, it's a hub system. I'm not spending a ton of time way up on the ridges. I'm not spending a ton of time in like long ridges. Like I'm really trying to find these very diverse, very like terrain based systems that just hold a lot of bedding opportunity. If they have clear cuts, that adds to it. If they have a bunch of different food sources around, it adds to it. If it's hard to access, even better. If it's a swampy bottom, even better. Like I can pool all these things together, and that's what I'm really trying to focus on. And for me, yes. So when I get in a hub system, like I feel like the best way to become a very efficient hunter is you have two options, right? You can either focus on a little bit of everything and be a jack of all trades, which is great. That's very important. Or you can take the approach like I have and you get really good at one thing, but you're missing a bunch of holes in your game later down the road. And so like that's me. Like on the surface, I probably look like I'm a very well-rounded hunter to a lot of people, but like I can tell you I'm not. I'm missing a lot of what I should be doing. And it's really showcased like during the rut. Like I struggle more than just about anybody that I know during the rut. Like I cannot find deer. I can't get on deer. I really have a hard time. Late season, it kind of gets back into that same early season thing. But like the time when a lot of people are really successful and love being in the woods, I hate being in the woods the first 3 weeks of November. I would just rather not even take my bow and go scout, to be honest with you. It's just,
I mean, at least from a weather standpoint, I couldn't disagree more.
yeah.
Like, you want to contrast early season mosquitoes to late season, like your mid-season November. No, that's interesting. But like, can you go back real quick and can you define what you're classifying as a hub system? Because on the recent podcast, I think it was 7, with Ryan, you talked about a micro hub. I'm like, shit, I don't even know what a hub is. Like, I've heard Derek talk about rub clusters. I actually think Tony Peterson talked about it when we had him on too. I don't know if he called it the same thing.
He did.
Okay. So like I'm picking up these really fun new concepts. So like let's add another one to my list of things I can consider for this season. What are you you talked about this diverse habitat, and you talked about the horseshoe of the hub facing like a certain direction, northeast or whatever you had said there. So like can you just explain that real quick for the listeners and me?
Yep. So I am going to do a little shameless plug here. And if anybody really wants a good visual representation with maps, the Latitude in Session videos showcase this a lot. And it was actually one of the reasons that we came up with that. It was exactly because of this question, because it's a very hard thing to explain, right? But like the best way to do it is I can tell you like, put your hand up like a C, right? And then you can see that there's an opening this way. So this C, like where your fingers are, represent the way that the hills would be shaped. So I would have a main ridge, that's my hand. I would have a sub ridge as my thumb and a sub ridge as my pointer. And those are going to be the bedding points. Now, any little sub bedding points I can get in here, add to it. Like I have spots where there's, like within the sea, there's 15 or 20 different points that jut out. So for, 270 degrees of the wind direction for a leeward bedded buck, he can bed somewhere up here and have a wind advantage and have a sight advantage.
That reminds me a lot of, I took sailing lessons a long time ago, and there's something called a point of sail. And people don't understand that when you're sailing, you don't have to just have the wind to your back. Like you can hit the wind and get the wind to fill your sail.
Same idea.
Every way except for directly in, which is luffing. So
yes,
I'm just trying to like picture in my head. So
and that's why, he's saying the more
the
those little
degrees
small bump outs, the more opportunistic that deer can be to use that hub, right? And I don't want words in your mouth.
No, 100%. But I run into this a lot in Ohio. The more of those bedding points you have, the more mature deer there are. And so like I have certain hubs that
watching
just
each other.
That you could have 4 or 5-year-old bucks in these hubs early season in Ohio. I'm talking like I could have 560 plus inch deer in the same system on public ground just because that hub is that diverse. But the thing that really, like I always hear this, and I've already got it on the YouTube videos a little bit, and I totally understand where they're coming from. Like I've been there myself. Everybody talks about getting busted down in these hubs, right? Because the wind directions, we're going down a rabbit hole. I'm going to circle back to the camera thing, I promise you. But
no, that's cool. That's cool.
Everybody's talking about like the wind swirling down there, but the thing that I've learned is you have an opening here, right? Like the sea faces this way. If the wind is blowing that way, like from the back of the sea to the front of the sea, and that's the way that the drainage runs, you have an elevation drop, right? You're losing elevation, so at night your thermals are going to pull. And if the wind is straight in line with that drainage, and it's not too of a high velocity, your scent all day long will get sucked right out of that. So if you access from this way with the wind in your face, You get in here, you are bulletproof on your wind all day long. Now, where people get in trouble is if they have a crosswind. So as soon as you have a crosswind blowing like this, it swirls like crazy in those hubs because the wind hits the hills have thermals. It creates just this washing machine down there. So like that's the big thing. I hear people hunting hubs and getting winded a lot. I'm like, you got to hunt them on the day where the wind is blowing directly out the drainage or at least very close to really have a high probability of success in there. Otherwise, you're probably going to get blown out. And I've done it myself. So what I do is I find them for every direction. If you find one for a south wind, for a north wind, for an east wind, for a west wind, you have somewhere to hunt all the time. So like I would say that the predominant prevailing wind in Ohio is going to be west or south, right? So the majority of the hubs I'm finding, we get back to this east or north thing, are draining out to either the north or to the east in that 90-degree area. So that's my number one focus, but I always have to have backup plans. And I do this a lot when I go out of state. I make sure I have a hub system scouted with cameras in it for every wind direction, because I would hate to go to Kentucky, right? Like let's go to Kentucky on a 4-day trip and I've scouted these hubs that face to the north for a south wind and I get there and I have a north wind the whole time. Well, I can't hunt that hub system now because my wind's going to be blowing right to the bedded deer. So like having all of these played out in your head and having backup plans for all those wind directions is huge. Now, where I get into actually running cameras in these areas is if you find a hub like that, the majority of the time there is going to be some sort of scrape in there. And typically it's going to be down low where all those trails converge. It's just like a rut convergence. Like you have the hub of the wheel. So down there, if there isn't a scrape, I'll create a hub scrape. But a lot of times there's already a good like beat down scrape with, tons of licking branches. The dirt's scraped out from years and years and years of use. And I'll run a camera down there. And I put one out in June of 2019 when I moved here, and I checked that camera in July. And I had over $15 on that camera in a month. Like just different deer using that system. They all walk by that camera. So
wow.
If you want to collect your inventory throughout the summer, that's a great way to do it, is run it on those hub scrapes. And we get into a bunch of things there, right? Like we can go down a 5-hour conversation on this, but what I do as far as my cameras is I put them out in like right now, June, early July, get them all out in the woods. And then I let them soak. I let them soak until the month of September. We open up at the end of September. So I start checking my worst cameras first, like the first week of September. And as we get closer to the opener, I wait to check them. And I'll check my best cameras, or where I think the biggest deer is going to be last, like within like 3 to 5 days of season. The reason I'm doing that brings me all the way back to your question about verifying food sources. And I'm doing that because when I'm in there checking that camera, I'm also verifying the food sources that day. So I'm only going in there and intruding one time. So that's my thought process. And the reason why I wait to check those cameras until September, this is a huge detail. This is one of the most important things with hill country is a lot of these systems that aren't extremely diverse. Like if you don't have a bunch of clear cuts in there and it's really mature timber and it's just like oaks in there, there's not going to be a lot of deer in there if there's an ag field close by in the summertime. So if you run cameras in there and you pull them in August before the deer shift back into the big woods, you're going to check that camera and be like, I don't even have a deer on it. This spot's junk. But if you would have let those cameras soak another week, those deer are going to shift back into the hardwoods on those white oaks, and it's loaded with deer. So I've actually made that mistake quite a bit myself, and I've learned my lesson where the cameras need to soak until the shift. Like I anticipate the acorn shift every year.
That's crazy. That's one of those things that I would not get the deer, and I would just, like you said, I wouldn't even realize I was making the mistake. And I think that's probably a lot of hunters like, oh, no deer. Like I've done my homework. There's no inventory here, writing it off. And you think maybe you're doing great. And it's like, it's hard to even have that much awareness to know that you have potentially made a mistake by checking too soon. Like, this is what I mean when I talk to guys like you and Derek and others that are like these killers. You guys are in tune at such a level that it's like hard for I've explained this as like a professor in college being, too damn smart to be teaching. Not to say that that's what's happening here, but sometimes people are so good at their craft. You're aware of things that like I can't even begin to fully understand until you get those experience points under your belt.
Well, I've seen it in a couple different ways, and exactly what Jake is talking about too, where like I've been with friends who have hung cameras on like a rub line, right? Like there's big rub line from the last year, and sometimes it's not food related, but it's just cover related here in Wisconsin, security cover related. So it's probably going to hold deer at some point during the fall. Like they're dealing with, they're bedding here because of security. But they hang it on a rub line. They're excited. We do like a spring scouting session. They hang the camera in June or July, and then check it before season. Well, there's nothing on it. Tore the camera down. Well, dude, they're not even rubbing yet. Like they're using that area obviously during the fall. Once they've shed their velvet, once the transition has happened, you can't judge summer pictures, what's going to happen in the fall. Just like he's saying, Jake really focuses on these food sources, especially with oaks. Like if the deer are hitting a hot oak, like it's going to happen quick within days. So his theory of like doing it in a few days before you're going to hunt is excellent. And that's why like a lot of the cameras I hang are like where I can hang and then I have a tree already planned to hunt within 30 yards of that camera. So I know if I check that camera on my way in and there's something good, I have a spot that I can already set up and hunt in. It's all that like matter of time, that most recent information that makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, the timing of information and intel, like you're talking about rub line historically, this is rub line, someone hang camera there, nothing happens. You're like, well, that's because they're not using it. Derek at one point had mentioned, I think you had done some videos for our YouTube, and you were talking about the age of rubs, which is very apparent, like, but it wasn't an occurring thought. Like the information's there, but I'm not seeing the message.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so you're like, this rub was probably made in September. This one's probably made in October. This one's made in November. And then you're like, well, if this is hot in September, then I would look at this area for a September hunt, not a November hunt. And the November hunt where I would always just be like, oh, that's a fresh rub. This looks good. I want to do this. That's different intel. It's telling you a different message about what's happening at a different point in time. This is like, man, this stuff is that's why I love deer hunting, because it's endless. The things that you can learn and apply. And Bill is just texting me, and he was talking about their LiDAR feature. And I'm not going to try to go define what LiDAR means, other than it's terrain features, but naked. It strips out any of the vegetation, any of that satellite imagery, and it gets you this crystal clear image in 3D of those ridges. So when you're talking about that sea,
and that what Jake was mentioning off of the sea, it becomes much more apparent, right?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen
and Jake probably uses that, I would imagine.
For anybody viewing right now, you can get a sense for it. I'm just sharing an Instagram post they have, but this is what I'm talking about. It's like, I say naked because it's like, reminds me like a naked cat or a naked rat. Just looks a little different than what we're used to seeing. I don't know of any other app that has this feature to do A, 3D, B LiDAR, and like the proximity of their topo lines are just ridiculous. And then you factor in the fact that you can like do that, I'm locking. My brain's shutting down for the day apparently in the middle of the podcast. you can do the time scrubbing to like, you can look at data from last week or last month or last season. So in terms of like crop rotation too, like was it corn last year? Well, not to be being this year, but you can go and validate that on Spartan Forge. But LiDAR is radar using light, is what Bill just texted me to save my ass. He's obviously listening. Probably
Thanks, Bill.
His face is to his palm and going, "Come on, Eric." But no, this is like really fun stuff, man. Like this is. So I'll let you go back to the camera.
I want to hear the camera thing, but I just want to point out that even before the camera thing, so like the jump you're making right now, right, Eric, is like it all relates to, and I mentioned this with Bo Martonic on East Meets West. Like there's two things great deer hunters do. They dedicate an immense amount of time and they become fanatical about one thing. Jake, with the last few seasons, however many days he's put in, is an immense, crazy amount of effort and miles. And every time you walk by a scrape or a rub, like it's building this catalog in your mind, whether you know it or not, like like all of that. And that's where like you haven't had the chance to just put in as much time as like some of these other people. And most people haven't. But like that's where this comes from. So those people who are like, oh, how do these guys always do it?
Yeah.
Like there is luck that is involved, but like it's also this immense amount of time that's been dedicated to this thing. And then Jake has obviously like found this beautiful terrain system that is efficient in your trail cameras, like, running trail cameras here in Wisconsin, when he was talking about going back and forth between focusing on some like a couple really good areas versus widespread, like I've done that back and forth over
you
the
put out
last
a lot
20
of cheapies
years
to cast that wide
yeah,
net.
and like sometimes I cast a wide net, but like if you're casting a wide net, 1 or 2 cameras per property, like you have to have a great spot to be able to pick up pictures. Like if you don't have a great spot to hang a camera, you're not going to know what the heck is on there, whether you think you do or not. Like, so Jake has found a spot that not only is going to give him great pictures, that hub scrape, because all of those beds, the surrounding points, they're all going to come down and cross that spot. Like he mentioned at some point, he's got a great spot to collect pictures and collect inventory of that area. And then that translates directly into hunting that area as it correlates to a food source. So like his efficiency, he always talks about efficiency. He's found a spot that makes him super efficient in collecting pictures and in hunting. And he's just trying to replicate that as many times as he can.
That's awesome.
And like, that's my view of what Jake does and does really well.
That's a great summation, Derek. Dude, good job. Like, I just need this extra like talk to like really flesh it out in my mind. And
is that helping or hurting?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll have to listen to this episode again probably, but it's good. So Dan Infalt, you had mentioned him at one point. We had him on our podcast a long time ago back in the Where to Hunt days also, and I happen to see him in Fleet Farm every year for gun season in the same aisle, picking up whatever potato chips because he lives like not far. Also saw him at a Mexican restaurant, bought him a shot, and that didn't go well because he doesn't drink, and I didn't realize that, so I ended up taking an extra shot of tequila. But so he at some point, and like clearly he didn't invent this, but he talks about oxbows. So I'm going to give him the credit there for talking about oxbows. But oxbows are the same shape as this hub system you're talking about. It's a C, and an oxbow, the deer, even if it's a small oxbow or a large one, an oxbow is the bend in the river, and they tend to bed with their back to the like as close to the river as possible. So anything coming at them from the open part of the C shape, they can just jump in the water and back out because a lot of predators aren't going to jump in the water. So like it's just interesting that deer are using the C shape. I just connected this dot as you were talking about it, so I just felt compelled to talk about it.
No, I think it's a great correlation.
I've had a lot of success around water. That's been my jam right now. Like water has been really helpful for me.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is whatever it is, whatever you have success with, just continue to build off that, right? And just continue to fine tune it and ask those questions why. And that's the only way you're going to build this confidence. The second part of your question earlier was how do you build the confidence to go into some of these areas and just know you're in the right spot? And honestly, there's a couple different things there, but I would say the first thing is like we've already been talking about. It's by making those mistakes, by learning from those lessons, by staying open-minded enough to continue to learn and evolve and not just thinking that you have everything figured out. I'm listening to every hill country podcast I can to try to just get a little bit better. Like I'm made up with this stuff like you guys are and like a lot of your listeners are. So for me, it's like I want to make sure that I have the most amount of knowledge possible. I want to go and I want to try it. And then I want to evolve my own strategy based on when I fail, because I'm going to fail at first. Like it's just going to happen. It should happen, maybe it doesn't every time, but I think that failure is always looked at in the hunting world as like this terrible thing, like this big blanket that gets pulled over you and like you failed for the season. Well, you know what? There's so much to take away from like my season last year, spending 70 days in the woods, failing 70 times. Like I came out of that season, in my opinion, a much more well-rounded hunter than I was before that. And I'm grateful for every failure, and I'm going to just be a better hunter this year. Like I'm going to figure out a way to take all that information gained and evolve it and then come out the other end a little bit better.
Yeah, you can't get better unless you're willing to fail. And it's hard to have that mindset because failing, it sucks. It's not a good feeling.
No.
And not failing, like then you're just kind of comfortable. You don't have to deal with the pain of failure. So this is stupid too. Like I used to disc golf when I was younger. I loved it. People always thought I was a stoner. I wasn't. I just like disc golfing. It's fun. And I got really good at a particular throw, like this right-handed underarm throw. I got super accurate.
With the one finger?
Two fingers underneath and like this flick, And I got really good with it. But that shot was always only great for like right-handed or like right hooks.
Yeah.
And I could S-curve it and do great. But there was a lot of times where I needed to whip it across my chest from left to right. But every time I did that, I sucked at it. That thing would just ratchet to the right, never come back to the left. I would suck at it. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to commit this summer to learning this other throw so I have more tools in my toolbox so I can approach more. So I failed the whole time. Like I just failed. And everyone's like, dude, you should just go back to the other throw. I'm like, no, I got to figure this out. And eventually I got it down. And then I was even better. I had to go through a season of failure to add that to my arsenal. And so with whitetail, I remember the season when I decided I'm going to spend an entire season doing weird shit that's uncomfortable I'd not done before and bump bucks. I want to get eyes on these things. I want them running away from me. I want to get close. I don't care if I kill it. I just need to know that they're there. And I wanted to get that validation. So I've gotten like past this huge threshold of failure. I think I'm fine.
But that's
I was like 6 seasons of failure, but I'm adding to my arsenal of overall capability. And if I wasn't willing to fail, you're not going to add anything new to your tool belt.
Being willing to fail is just saying you're being willing to grow. Like you know what I mean? Like that's really what it is. And I drove up to the cabin the other night, Sunday night, 3-hour drive. I wanted to go scout, and I was picking up a new bow. And the drive up, I listened to John Dudley, who's a phenomenal archer. And one of the things he talked about was at an early age, he realized that if you turn all of your worst issues, your worst, your problematic failures, what you are the worst at, into your strongest attributes, you'd be so much better. So he said the same thing. I would take these things that I thought I was bad at, and I would focus on them for a month. 21 days to break a bad habit, psychology says. And he would focus on them and then turn those into his strengths. Like that's the idea.
Well, I also have an opposite belief.
Did.
I also have an opposite belief where like I also just punt things I suck at. Like I will not do math. I suck at grammar. Like I'm not going to get better at those
not
things.
Important. Not important.
But yeah, I mean, even our studio, like how many times do I fail in this place because I decided to reinvent the wheel here, So that's if we have failures, it's because we're trying to grow. But dude, anyways, we've hijacked whatever you were saying about cameras and intel and all that stuff. But we're just getting all excited over here.
No, I love it. I love the rabbit holes. This is what it's all about.
But it's a learning thing. That's what hunting is. So great. I can't ever articulate to my wife. I'm like, it's a puzzle that I'll never solve, and that's why I love it. But I also hate puzzles, so that's confusing.
It's just interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Jake.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll get into this in a little bit. I'm holding on.
Oh no, I love listening to people who are successful in the whitetail world and how their tactics and how their brain works is just different. Being a teacher and educator, like I love to see all the different facets of how people attack different problems, right? Like a word problem, or like deer hunting is just a really complex problem. And everybody attacks it in a different way. And I love seeing you find a finite way that works for you and you make that work. And there are other people who will find like I've heard you say, I would rather find a deer that's killable than a bigger one that I don't think is killable. Like it's in a terrain, it's in a situation type that's different than what I'm used to, that I don't think I can figure out. And that's just so interesting. Like I'm a stubborn son of a bitch, and I will find a deer and I will hunt it wherever the hell it lives and be super unsuccessful. This is what I've done my whole life. I'll be super unsuccessful for years chasing this, but that deer will teach me so much. And like, you know what I mean? Like and it comes back to the efficiency factor. I feel like that's a really important part of who you are. Me, I'll go on a 4-day hunt out of state, never have scouted, and just throw hunts. Like just think about it hardcore, like wind, terrain, and I don't care if I see something or not. Like I learned something on the way, and then I'll scout my way out. Oh, geez, the rub line was just 50 yards down the hill, and it's just interesting to see how different people's minds work, right? Like there's no right way, there's no wrong way.
Yeah, 100%. And the other part of that question of, how you get in the right spot and how do you like act upon that intel, I think the other side of that we really haven't spoken on a whole lot yet is just confidence, right? It's like figuring out a way to build that confidence. And I don't think there's any better way to do that than just trusting yourself and your abilities. Like, and it sounds really simple, right? Like if I'm sitting here saying it and it sounds super simple, but like, even I find myself getting caught up in this from time to time where I question myself. It seems like when I do that, I should have just trusted my gut. And so like the way that I hunt is like very feeling based. And I've heard a lot of people talk about like hunting very specific intel and like being extremely intel based. And I think that that's very important but I also think it's very important to not lose sight of your feelings and your emotions as well, because if you trust yourself and you go in and you fail, you're going to learn something from that, and then your gut instinct is going to be a little bit different next time. And you just keep doing that time after time after time, and eventually your gut instinct is going to get a little bit better. And so if you just continue to trust yourself, I think that you're going to build into the hunter that you want. And that there's a lot that goes into that, though. There's, like somebody that this is their first year scouting. Like, what I would tell you is go out and scout as hard as you can. Like, I know you might be limited on time. You might not have a ton of areas you can hunt, but whatever you can do. Leave it all on the table and go into this season and make a decision and just trust yourself and go for it. And if you fail, you know what? You're going to learn a lesson. You're going to figure it out. If you go kill the buck, congratulations. That's awesome. It probably won't happen to me very often, but that's a really, really cool thing.
So, man, I've been just like a little bit off the mark, and that's been enough for me to feel validated. Like if you end up, not that you have time either for the record, but if you ever wanted to watch anything other than the latitude stuff, check out the Okayest Hunter YouTube. Check out the playlist for the season of We'll See How It Goes. And there's the episode I got the buck, that's fine. But then there's this one called That Was a Lot of Shenanigans. And I think there's 60 jump cuts of me scratching my head going, I don't know. Is that the tree? Is this a tree? And I'm just in all these different spots the same area. This went on for 3 hours. I couldn't pick a spot. And I'm looking at the camera and I'm like, dude, if Derek were here, he would have had a spot picked. Right, this wouldn't be happening. You could just see me doubting every thought I was going to make. But what ended up happening is I got really close to this 6-pointer on a crowded public property, and I was just I was probably 20 yards off the mark and just on the opposite side of this thick stuff. And when I saw him come through, my heart was through my chest. I was freaking out. I thought it might have been a 12-pointer for me. It just didn't matter because I had figured it out. I was like, I figured out where he was betting. I figured out where to set up, and I was just slightly off. And if you have those, to me, when I say success, that to me is success. Getting the deer, yeah, that's successful. But those other moments, there's other successful moments that happen that can help build you up as a deer hunter and build up that confidence. And for me, last season was a pretty big deal for that, making that happen, and then missing the deer because my bow broke. That was
yeah, your peep sight snapped.
But
yeah, I love it. Do you see Lucas's little thing he wrote in?
Right yeah, let's throw that up on the screen. I don't have any callers in queue, so I can take that off real quick. It says, Lucas said, I've been doing a lot of scouting sits during season when I don't know a lot of data for newer spots. It's worked and helped extremely well for me. Gained more confidence every time. That's great.
Yeah, and I can observation sits, right? I definitely utilize those. I probably utilize observation sits, especially when I was in New York, more before season than I actually do in season, where just go out and sit on a field, the week leading up to season and just trying to glass deer, just verifying where they're come out. And my buddy Ethan Eskew is really, really good at this. He does this in West Virginia a lot, where he'll go sit on the field edges and glass and glass and glass every night. And then opening day, he goes in and he kills the buckies after him. Man, that's awesome. So yeah, the observation sets are huge. And then in-season scouting, I think, is extremely overlooked too. And, I hunted, I was in the woods 70 days during season last year. We've talked about that, but I don't think a lot of people know that I only took my bow probably 15 to 20 times total. And I was only confident. I was confident less than 5 times. I took the jet sled to drag the deer out less than 5 times. But yeah, so 50 of the times that I was in the woods in season, I didn't even carry a bow. And that to me is my style of hunting, and what I like to get out of hunting is the chess match we talk about, right? I don't want to luck into a deer. I don't want to go out and just randomly come across one. For me, what gets me going is knowing his move and going in there and capitalizing on it, and it actually happens. So for me, if I don't have the intel and the confidence that I need to think that that's going to happen, I'd rather just go out and scout. And so to get into in-season scouting a little bit, what I did a lot last year is I was I was rotating cameras. So I'd go into a new area, and this is just trying to locate a shooter, right? Because of the EHD thing. I'd go into a new area, drop a camera down or a couple cameras. I would go to the next area and check the ones I already had out. And then if they were good, I'd hunt somewhere in the area. If not, I would take them down. And then the next day I'd do the exact same thing. 3 to 4 days later, I'd revisit the ones that I put out on that Wednesday. So I just had this rotation of checking cameras and placing cameras, just trying to find deer. And there's a lot to be said about that. Like if I was after just a buck, like that's probably not what needs to happen. You can scout your way in and hunt a lot. I think you get into more of that when you're like after like at least some type of deer. And so, take that for what you will.
Man, I love looking into deer.
I've got a
you were hunting a monster one down near here last season, and you were pretty hot to trot on that guy. Like you didn't luck into a deer, but you happened to set him a spot where you saw like deer that I would have happily killed, but you were like after something very different.
Yeah, I had hung two cameras in the summer and got a picture of a very, very, very nice deer, and kind of focused my season and this season potentially toward that deer. But I kind of like to do that similarly. I just had a question for Jake here. This is totally selfish because it doesn't matter because I'm not hunting the same area as you. But so, at some point during the season in your trail camera pulls, you had realized EHD has taken a major toll and like you were going to have, a hard time finding a deer to hunt. I'm wondering what changed in your approach in your trail cams. Like, were you continuing to focus on scrapes even though you knew the deer population, mature buck density had potentially gone down? So like they were maybe frequently, not frequenting scrapes as much. Did you focus more on security cover? Did you kind of stick to the same plan? How did like the adversity that you met with EHD and like the decreased deer numbers, how did that play into like how you decided to set trail cams?
So that's a great question. And that evolved the entire season, to be honest with you. When I first recognized that I had an issue, it was in September, a couple weeks before season. And I went in and I checked, I have 50 cameras in the woods and I check them and I had a bunch of really good deer, like really big mature deer on camera that hadn't showed up in like 2 months. And I remember walking to check cameras and a couple of these areas, the white oaks were dropping like crazy and there was no deer crap on the ground anywhere. There was like nothing torn up. There was no deer sign, no little rubs, like nothing, no tracks. Nothing happening. And so for me, what it really started with was I started taking cameras down. I would leave like one camera in that area just so I could come back there. And I started taking a lot of these cameras down and I was just scouting around, like looking at my maps, trying to find I was trying to broadcast out wide enough to where I thought I could get out of some of these pockets of EHD where it hit really hard. It's like, okay, I know that this section's bad. Maybe one drainage over isn't far enough. Maybe I need to go like out of the county, or I need to go like 10 miles this way or 10 miles that way. And so like I kind of got into that thing, but it got to the point where I was really just like, I was trying to find deer sign. I was trying to find deer poop. I was trying to find tracks. I was trying to find any sort of buck sign that I could. And if I found that, wherever that was, I would find a spot to just put a camera. And, I did run some on scrapes. Like I would get into some of these new systems and there would be, the hub scrapes were opened up in some of them. And I'd run a camera in there and it'd be like a bunch of 2-year-olds or 1.5-year-old bucks and a couple does. Like there just wasn't a ton of action anywhere. But I ran cameras up higher on trails. I ran cameras on like exact food sources because the food sources were very limited. We didn't have any red oaks last year. We didn't have any chestnut oaks last year. We had very sporadic whites. So in a lot of these big wood settings, there wasn't a ton of food, like a little bit of beech nut here and there, but not a ton at all. So it was really just a mile of covering ground. I would cover ground, find whatever sign I could. And when I got into that pocket of sign, just set a camera up somewhere that made sense to me at the time. It could be, I had some on even like on signpost rubs. And I don't think I've ever ran a camera on a signpost rub until last year. And last year was the first time, I was just like, when what you're doing isn't working, like something that I always felt really good at, it's just not working anymore. I was like, okay, I'm just going to figure out a way to, like, I'm going to start over and just figure out a way to work in my favor. Even if it's something I have no idea what so that's what I did. I just like I was just like scratching and clawing, if that makes sense. I was literally doing it I could possibly think of and listening to everybody I could and getting advice from. The great thing about what we do now in these podcasts and everything else is I feel like the mobile hunting community is just, they're all so great to each other, right? Like we have so many people to learn from. There's so many high level hunters and I do the exact same that a lot of people probably do, where I reach out to everybody I can. Like, hey, I would like to talk to you about this situation. What do you think is going to work? And thankfully we have a ton of resources. So that was kind of my process. It was all over the place.
Talked about this before, but that's where trail cams can be so important. Is like you don't have to understand it, but like you can get confidence from what you kind of know, or like attempt to get confidence by like hanging a trail cam where you really don't know what's going on.
Yep.
Hang a trail cam there, and then you'll see.
And then you
like, is there
about,
bucks there?
Can
yes or
I
no?
get a buck in daylight?
Is there a buck in daylight?
Yeah.
Is it a big? Like you can learn a lot, and that's where a lot of confidence can come from. Is like just understanding how they use those different areas.
It's cool. And there's like studies out there that validate things. The MSU Deer Labs, the stuff with Spartan Forge is fantastic. So there's like the scientific stuff, the habitat stuff, the technical stuff, the tactical stuff, the strategy. Like there's so many things that go into it. But, as much as we're a proponent for like, ending hunter shaming and deer bashing and all that, which we just got some more of that bullshit on the internet the other day. I posted that Photoshop montage of
the younger buck.
Someone literally did say to me, "I know where that tree is," instead of congratulations. I thought it was kind of silly, and so I thought, "Oh, it's a funny. I'll make a video out of this, right? Editing the tree out." And someone had commented, "Why would you even bother posting that deer to social media to begin with?
Did somebody say
you're
that?
a grown man." Yeah, I was like, my comment. I didn't even get in. I was like, my comment was, I was a grown man who felt like a 12-year-old boy on Christmas, buddy. This is my first bow buck on public land. I don't give a shit what you have to say to me, man. It's all good. So, but I say all that to say, by and large, the community is so helpful and positive. Like negativity just happens to be allowed, which we've said several times. But the fact that you can phone a friend, like in these mobile hunting groups, I think they can get a bad reputation. You'll post something and people dogpile in a negative way. It's like they just start stomping someone, like the Jake's dude of the Tom that just got killed. Like, I think certain Facebook groups do that. But there's a lot of people that are genuinely willing to be super helpful. And it's an abundant mindset or an abundance mindset. The guys that are really good at killing big deer have no concern about what you're going to do to impact their hunt. So they're willing to help. So like folks like you, Greg Litzinger and
Andy May,
Johnny Stewart, Andy May, Tony Peterson, all of these guys are just ready to help you learn, because they're not concerned that you're going to ruin it for them. Like they want to share the experience with you so you can experience what that feels like also.
Like look at what Jake has done over the last few years with like describing his exact process.
Literally, this is what
works
I do. Yeah.
The best for him. He's explained it like a million times.
That's like business. It's like, tell me what you did. Well, dude, what I did was at a different moment in time. You won't even understand the mechanics of it all. Like it's not literally going to work for you, but like you can learn from some things and apply it for how it will work for you and make it your own. It's all of these things are like analogous to all things in life. But hunters are very passionate, visceral people.
Yeah, and contrary to popular belief, I think that there's, my opinion, of course, but I think that there's enough land out there to where we should be able to teach anybody anything they want to know and help them out. And we should be able to share the land. Like I don't deserve it any more than anybody else does. And if they find a good spot, congratulations, go kill a giant. Like I hope you guys go in there and have fun and take your kids and everything else. So yeah, it's truly about finding people that are just good people and want to help. And like you said, the Facebook groups are overwhelmingly positive. You'll have a bad egg or two in there, but you know what? There's a lot of good people. So I think that there's a lot of good in that.
Yeah, I think we could probably bring the plane in for a landing. We could talk. I can hear my kids rustling around. I must let the dogs loose. It sounds like a freaking train upstairs all of a sudden. But
same here. I got one up there. Crazy.
Well, dude, thanks for taking time. I know you got your other podcast you're doing, so it meant a lot to us. So you're willing to take time out impromptu to jump on with us. It's been a while. It's good to talk with you. Anytime you're in Wisconsin, hit us up. You can come and drink some bourbon here in studio with us, or we have beer too. We just never really drink the beer. Usually gets warm.
Yeah, of course, guys. Thanks for having me on, and I'm gonna have to have you on in session soon.
Yeah, probably Derek would be a better fit for that.
Oh, come
Greg.
on. Come on.
You can bring me on. We can talk about, what not to do. I'd be happy to be that guy. That'd be great. So
it was great talking with you, buddy. We appreciate you, diving into stuff and looking at it from kind of our perspective of our podcast here. And just appreciate everything you've done.
Yeah, and you're gonna be at that Mobile Hunter Expo?
Yeah, I'll be at both of them. That's going to be an awesome time. And speaking of people, talking, giving out information the speaker list is unbelievable for those. So I actually am blessed enough to where I can go listen to all those guys.
Right.
I can actually spectate with all the guest speakers. So I'm super excited for that. The Latitude booth will be there, guys. So if you want to stop over and check some gear out or just talk hunting with us, we'll all be there.
Awesome.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, we'll talk to you soon. I'll end the live broadcast, hang out for maybe just a second or two. We'll debrief. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Appreciate it.